All right, so today we're diving into something pretty heavy. We're talking about international education and
Yeah.
student visas and the whole system of trust between students and agencies and, yeah, just really how complicated global mobility can get.
Yeah.
So you sent me this Times XP video, right? The one about all these Indian students in Canada
Mhm.
who might be deported because of fake acceptance letters.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation with a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and it makes you really think
Yeah.
about just how difficult it can be to navigate these systems when you're coming from a different country.
Right. And especially when you're relying on someone else to kind of guide you through it,
Yeah.
you're putting a lot of faith in these agencies and consultants.
Exactly. And it seems like in this case, that trust was misplaced for a lot of these students.
Absolutely.
So let's break it down. The Times XP video, it focuses on this group of like 10,000 students,
Yeah.
mostly from these two Indian states, Gujarat and Punjab, right? And they came to Canada on student visas. Everything seemed legit, but then it turns out their college acceptance letters, they were forged.
It's wild. You can only imagine the shock, right? Like these students, they uproot their whole lives, they invest tons of money, tons of time and energy, all for this opportunity to study in Canada. And then to find out that it was all based on a lie, it's just devastating.
Totally. It's like their whole future is suddenly up in the air.
Yeah.
And the financial hit alone, it's massive. The video mentions families shelling out something like 25 lakh,
Yeah.
which is, what, about 30,000 US dollars per student?
Yeah, that's right. And that's money that they might never see again.
Right. It's just gone.
Gone. And for a lot of these families, that's their life savings.
Exactly. It's just heartbreaking. And the worst part is they might not even be able to stay in Canada.
Right. Like the video, it quotes this visa expert, Panash Patel, and he basically says, look, if these letters are proven to be fake, then these students' admissions are going to be canceled. They're going to be sent back to India.
And so this is where it gets really complicated, right? Because it's not just about the individual students anymore.
Right.
It's about the potential for mass deportations, the impact that could have on relations between Canada and India. It's a whole geopolitical thing.
Totally. Like imagine the strain on diplomatic ties, the potential backlash from the Indian government, the impact on future collaborations, research programs, even just the general trust between the two countries.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect for sure. And it makes you wonder, like, how could this even happen on such a large scale? Where are the checks and balances?
That's the million-dollar question. And to be fair, the video does mention that Canadian officials have actually been pretty proactive in trying to weed out these fake acceptance letters. They've checked something like 500,000 of them in the past 10 months.
Right. And they found that the vast majority of them were totally legitimate, like 93% were genuine.
Right, so it's not like the whole system is broken, but even a small percentage of fraudulent cases, when we're talking about thousands of students, it's still a huge problem. It shows there are definitely gaps in the system.
So sure. And the video really points the finger at these fraudulent visa agencies and consultants.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who preyed on these students, promising them admission to Canadian colleges. But then they just gave them fake documents. They took their money and ran.
Exactly. And it's a classic scam, right? They target vulnerable people, people who are desperate for a better future, and they exploit that hope.
It's just so messed up. And it highlights a bigger issue, this whole lack of transparency and accountability in the international student recruitment industry.
Right. Like it's the Wild West out there, basically.
Yeah.
There are so many players, so
Yeah.
many agencies and consultants, and it can be really hard for students and families to know who to trust.
So what can they do? Like, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about studying abroad? How can they protect themselves from these scams?
Well, research, research, research. Like, do your due diligence. Verify the credentials of any agency you're thinking of working with. Check online reviews, talk to other students who have used their services, and if something feels off, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Trust your gut.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And I think this whole situation is a wake-up call, not just for students, but for everyone involved in the international education system, right?
Yeah.
Like governments, educational institutions, everyone needs to be more vigilant. We need to find ways to balance the need for global mobility with the need to protect students from exploitation.
Totally. And it's a complex issue, but it's one we need to address. We need to create a system that's fair, transparent, and accountable. We need to make sure that students who are taking this leap of faith are protected, that their dreams aren't shattered by deceit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you wonder, like, what are the long-term consequences of this situation? How will it impact the future of international education? How will it affect the relationship between countries like Canada and India? It's definitely something to think about,
Definitely. And it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
for sure. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time.